Good morning, dear friends, and welcome. Wherever you are listening from, your kitchen table, your quiet room, your morning walk, or your first breath before sunrise, I invite you to settle your heart for a moment. Let this be a gentle beginning to your day, a small pause where we remember that life does not have to rush us before we remember who stands with us. Thank you for being here. Thank you for bringing your heart, just as it is, into this moment. There was once a young woman named Clara who lived in a small hillside town where the seasons always seemed to shift with a certain gentleness. The kind of place where the morning mist clung to the rooftops like a soft blanket and where the sound of early bird song blended with the distant rhythm of church bells. Clara had grown up all her life in that quiet town, surrounded by familiar faces and familiar patterns. She worked at a small bookshop on the corner, a place she loved because it always smelled of paper, ink, and old stories that refused to be forgotten. Yet despite all the calm around her, Clara carried within her a restlessness she did not know how to name. Each morning before unlocking the door of the bookshop, Clara made it a habit to pause outside and look at the old oak tree across the street. Her mother had once told her that the oak tree was older than most buildings in town, older than anyone living, and that its branches held a kind of wisdom, an unspoken reminder that time changes everything except the faithfulness of God. As a child, Clara believed those words with bright certainty. As an adult, she wasn't sure if she believed them at all. It wasn't that she had lost her faith, it had simply grown quiet. Life had a way of draining the color from things that used to feel vibrant. Over the years, Clara faced disappointments she never saw coming. Friendships drifting away, opportunities slipping through her fingers, in a long season of loneliness that made her wonder if she had been forgotten by God Himself. Even the prayers she once whispered so easily now felt heavy on her tongue, as if she wasn't sure whether anyone still listened. But change has its own way of arriving, and sometimes it begins with nothing more than a quiet morning and a small shift in the heart. One late autumn morning, as golden leaves spiraled down from the oak tree, Clara felt a tug within her spirit, a gentle nudge, a whisper she could not explain. Something inside her urged her to slow down, to pay attention, to look deeper than the surface of her daily routine. She stood there with her hands on the cold metal of the bookshop door and felt for the first time in many months that God was near, not in a dramatic way, not in a thunderous moment, but in the soft certainty that she was seen. That morning, as she arranged books on the display table, a regular customer walked in. His name was Mr. Hale, an elderly man with kind eyes and a gentle smile that always seemed to hold 1,000 unspoken memories. He came to the shop every Friday to browse, never in a hurry, always choosing one book even if he had read it 10 times before. On this particular morning, he picked up a thin volume titled The Seasons of Faith. He held it carefully, like something precious. "You know," he said in his soft, slow voice, "trees preach better sermons than most people." Clara laughed quietly, not sure what he meant. Mr. Hale tapped the cover of the book. "When the leaves change, when the wind shifts, when the branches wait in silence, they remind us that the world moves in rhythms. Nothing stays the same forever, except the one who keeps every season turning." She felt a warmth stir in her chest at his words. "You look like someone who's standing at the edge of a new season," he added gently. Clara did not know how to respond, but something about the way he said it made her feel understood, even comforted. Before leaving, he smiled and said, "When God prepares a heart, the signs are always simple. Pay attention." After he walked out, Clara held on to that sentence like a thread. For the rest of the morning, she found herself listening more closely to the rustle of pages, to the hum of passing cars, to the quiet thoughts she usually ignored. It felt as if an unseen curtain was being pulled back, allowing her to see beauty in ordinary moments. But beauty wasn't the only thing awakening. So was longing. A longing for meaning, for healing, for clarity about why her heart had grown weary and how she could find her way forward again. That evening, Clara returned home to her small apartment overlooking the hillside. The sun had dipped low, leaving streaks of orange and rose across the sky. As she prepared dinner, she noticed the Advent wreath sitting in the corner of her table. She had placed it there the week before, but never lit a candle. She hadn't felt ready. She hadn't felt anything except tired. But now something felt different. Clara sat down, resting her elbows on the table, and gazed at the unlit candles as if they were waiting for her to speak first. Advent was only 2 days away, and she knew, somewhere deep inside, that this season asked not for perfection, not for strength, but for readiness, for hearts willing to watch, to hope, to wait. She whispered almost timidly, "Lord, I want to believe you're still here." The words came out fragile, like a confession. She expected to feel foolish, but instead she felt a surprising peace wash over her. A peace that did not answer every question, but wrapped itself around her weariness like a blanket. For the first time in a long time, she sensed that God was not disappointed in her slowness or her doubts. He was simply inviting her to start again. That night, as she lay in bed listening to the wind move through the trees, Clara thought of the story she had heard earlier that day. Jesus telling his disciples that when the leaves change, when the branches give signs, they should recognize the nearness of God. She pictured the oak tree outside the shop, the shifting colors, the steady branches that held firm no matter how strong the wind blew. She realized the message had been there all along. Seasons change, hearts change, but God's word never does. This small understanding became the first spark of a much deeper journey, a journey she didn't yet fully grasp, but felt gently called into. And as the night settled around her and her eyes grew heavy, Clara whispered one more thought, a simple, unpolished prayer that rose naturally from her heart. "If you're near, teach me to see." And somewhere in the quiet, she felt a response, not in words, but in the certainty that morning would bring something new, something hopeful, something meant for her. The next morning arrived with a soft, muted light that seemed to rest gently on Clara's windowsill. She awoke before her alarm, something that rarely happened, and for a moment lay still beneath the warm blankets, listening to the quiet in her home. It felt different somehow, not empty, but expectant, as though the silence itself was waiting for her to take her first breath and step into a day that mattered more than she realized. She sat up slowly, letting the early air brush against her skin, and she felt a subtle flicker of purpose, faint but real, like the morning star still lingering before sunrise. As she prepared for her day, her thoughts returned again and again to the prayer she whispered the night before. "If you're near, teach me to see." It stayed with her like a gentle echo, neither demanding nor heavy, but hopeful, the way a seed rests in the soil, knowing that the warmth will come. When Clara arrived at the bookshop, she noticed the oak tree across the street shimmering with a thin layer of frost, each leaf catching the morning light in a way that made them sparkle like tiny stars. The sight tugged at her heart, reminding her of the words Jesus spoke about recognizing the signs of the times. There was a stillness to the world around her that felt almost sacred, and as she unlocked the shop door, she sensed that this day held something she needed. The hours passed quietly at first, customers drifting in and out, each absorbed in their own errands and worries. Clara found herself watching them more closely than usual, not out of curiosity, but out of a renewed awareness that each person carried stories, struggles, and hopes invisible to the eye. It made her wonder how many times she had rushed past people without realizing that they too were standing at the edge of their own unseen battles. And with that thought came a subtle, surprising compassion rising in her chest, something that warmed her more deeply than she expected. Around midday, a woman entered the shop carrying a small child who clung to her shoulder with tired eyes. The woman's face held a gentle sadness, though she smiled politely as she walked toward the counter. Clara greeted her softly, and the woman asked if the shop still carried a particular children's book about winter stars. Clara remembered it immediately. It was part of a series that taught simple lessons about kindness and courage. She guided the woman to the right shelf and handed her the book. "My daughter loves this one," the woman said, brushing a tear away quickly, as though she hoped Clara wouldn't notice. Clara hesitated but felt a soft urging within her. "Is everything okay?" The woman let out a shaky breath. "She's been having trouble sleeping, scared of the dark. Her father used to read this to her every night, but he passed away last month. I'm trying to keep their routine alive for her, but some nights it's hard." Her voice trembled, and the child looked up with wide, vulnerable eyes. Clara felt her heart tighten, not with discomfort, but with a deep compassion that stirred something inside her. She knelt slightly so she could meet the child's gaze. "This book helped you feel brave, didn't it?" Clara asked gently. The little girl nodded. "It will keep helping," Clara said. "Stories have a way of holding light for us when the night feels too big." The woman closed her eyes briefly, as though those simple words eased a weight she had been carrying alone. As she prepared to leave, Clara whispered, "You're doing well. Truly." The woman's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they weren't only tears of sorrow. After they left, Clara remained standing for a moment, feeling something unfamiliar stirring inside her. It was as though, in comforting someone else, a small part of her own heart had begun to heal. She hadn't felt that sense of purpose in a very long time, and it surprised her how natural it felt. How right. The afternoon continued quietly until Mr. Hale returned, carrying a worn notebook under his arm. He looked different today, not sad but thoughtful, almost reflective. He walked to the counter and placed the notebook gently on the surface. "I'm lending this to you," he said, surprising her. "It's a collection of reflections I've written over the years. Thoughts about faith, doubt, waiting, and the way God often speaks through silence more than noise." Clara hesitated to touch it. "Are you sure?" He smiled. "A book may be printed for many, but a reflection is written for someone who needs it. I think you need this one." She felt a mixture of gratitude and curiosity as she accepted the notebook. Something about the weight of it in her hands felt symbolic, as though she had been entrusted not only with paper and ink, but with wisdom carved from a lifetime of walking with God. "Read it slowly," he said before leaving. "Truth sinks deeper when we aren't rushing past it." When the shop closed that evening, Clara returned home and placed the notebook on the kitchen table beside her untouched Advent wreath. Her apartment felt unusually warm, though she had not adjusted the heater. She sat down, opened the notebook carefully, and began reading the first page. The words were simple, but carried a weight that touched her deeply. One entry spoke about the way God sometimes allows seasons of silence, not as punishment, but as preparation. Another described how faith often grows in hidden soil long before anything visible begins to bloom. And yet another spoke about waiting, holy waiting, the kind that shapes the heart into something it wasn't before. But it was the fourth entry that made Clara pause for a long time. It read, "When a heart begins to stir again, it is never by accident. God awakens what he intends to strengthen. Pay attention to the small signs. They are the first light before dawn." A tremor moved through her chest. Not fear, but recognition. She sensed that the stirring she felt in recent days was not her imagination. It was an invitation, a quiet, patient call from the one she thought had grown distant. She closed the notebook and rested her hand on top of it. The Advent wreath caught her eye again, its candles waiting. With a steady breath, Clara rose, found a lighter in the kitchen drawer, and returned to the table. She struck the flame and lit the first candle. A small glow filled the room, flickering gently, casting soft shadows across the walls. Clara watched the flame for a long moment, feeling its warmth travel through her. She realized she was no longer asking if God was near. She knew he was. The question now was whether she would follow the path he was quietly unfolding before her, whether she would allow him to rebuild what she thought was lost. As she sat in the dim flickering light, Clara felt something inside her soften, a quiet surrender, a willingness to step into the unknown with trust rather than fear. And though she did not yet understand the fullness of what God was preparing her for, she whispered a simple response into the stillness, the kind of prayer that marks the beginning of transformation. "I'm listening." And the candle's flame swayed as if acknowledging her words. The following days unfolded with a kind of gentle clarity Clara had not felt in years. It was not that her life suddenly became easy or that her worries dissolved overnight, but something inside her had shifted. It felt as though a veil had lifted just enough for her to notice God moving quietly in the spaces she used to overlook, guiding her through small details, soft moments, and unexpected encounters. Every morning she lit the Advent candle before heading to the bookshop, letting its warm glow steady her spirit before stepping into the rhythm of her day. And each evening, she added a few more pages of Mr. Hale's notebook to her reading, letting his reflections sink deeply into her heart like seeds settling into fertile soil. One particular entry stayed with her throughout an entire week. It said, "Faith matures when we learn to trust God without demanding that He work on our schedule." Clara had read those words 3 times before closing the notebook, feeling both comforted and challenged by them. She knew she had spent much of her life waiting for God to respond the way she expected, at the time she expected, in the way she believed was best. Yet here she was, discovering that God often moved in quiet, unhurried ways, shaping her heart long before she realized what He was doing. But with new clarity came new questions she did not quite know how to articulate. She found herself reflecting on her past hurts with a tenderness she had never allowed herself before. She remembered the friend who had grown distant, the job opportunity she had once prayed for but never received, the ache of feeling unseen during the years she felt lost. Yet instead of feeling bitterness rise within her, she now sensed something different, an invitation to look at those memories through a lens she had never used before. Perhaps they had not been signs of abandonment, but stepping stones towards something wiser, deeper, and more lasting. One cold morning, frost lined the sidewalks as Clara walked to the shop, her breath forming soft clouds in the air. When she reached the door, she paused as always to look at the oak tree. Its branches were almost bare now, but somehow that made it seem even stronger, as if its endurance was more visible in its simplicity than in its fullness. She ran her fingers along the cold door handle and whispered a silent prayer for God to keep guiding her through this unfamiliar but beautiful awakening. Inside the shop, she found a note waiting for her on the counter. It was folded neatly, placed where she could not miss it. She opened it, expecting a delivery message, but instead saw the familiar handwriting of Mr. Hale. "I'll be away for a few days. Keep the notebook. Let the words sink in slowly. And Clara, remember, faith doesn't grow only in light. It grows in longing." She read the note twice, surprised at how much comfort she felt from such a simple message. She had come to value his quiet wisdom more than she expected. Though their conversations were brief, they carried weight, as if God used them to nudge her gently in the right direction. The day unfolded peacefully. Customers came and went, the bell above the door chiming softly at intervals. Clara helped them with genuine warmth, noticing how her interactions with others began to shift. She found herself listening with more attention, speaking with more intention, feeling more present than she had in years. It was as though God had slowed her inner pace, teaching her to see the sacredness in ordinary moments. Late in the afternoon, as golden light streamed through the windows, a young man entered the shop. Clara recognized him vaguely. He had visited a few times before, often browsing quietly without buying anything. Today, however, he walked straight to the counter. "Do you have anything on starting over?" he asked softly, his voice fragile in a way that made Clara pause. "What kind of starting over?" she asked gently. He hesitated, his eyes drifting toward the floor. "Just beginning again, I guess. Finding hope after messing up a lot." Clara nodded with understanding. She led him to a small corner of the shop dedicated to memoirs and reflections. She chose a book she had read years ago, one that spoke of healing, forgiveness, and new beginnings. "This one might help," she said, handing it to him. He flipped through the pages slowly. "Do you really think people can change?" he whispered. Clara looked at him with a steady warmth she didn't fully recognize as her own. "I think people change all the time," she said. "Sometimes little by little, sometimes all at once. But I believe God keeps giving us new beginnings, even when we don't think we deserve them." His eyes softened. "Thank you," he said quietly. After he left, Clara remained still for a moment, touched by the simplicity of the exchange. She realized that guiding others toward healing had become part of her own healing. It was as though every time she offered compassion, a small part of her heart grew stronger, lighter, warmer. That evening, Clara returned home exhausted but peaceful. She lit the Advent candle as she always did, letting its small flame reflect on the window. The notebook lay open on the table waiting for her. She sat down and turned the page, finding another entry that seemed written directly for the question stirring in her heart. God does not rush transformation. He shapes the heart the way mountains are formed, through quiet pressure, layers of time, and the slow uncovering of hidden strength. Clara leaned back in her chair, letting those words settle. She realized she had been trying to understand her entire future in a single moment, expecting instant clarity where God wanted to offer gradual revelation. She didn't need to know everything yet. She only needed to take the next step. With that thought, she decided to take a walk before the sky grew too dark. She wrapped herself in a warm coat and stepped outside. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of winter approaching. Houses along the street glowed softly with early holiday decorations, small lights twinkling like distant stars. As she walked, she found her mind drifting to memories she rarely revisited. Times she had felt deeply disappointed, moments when she had questioned her worth, seasons when she believed God had forgotten her. But tonight, those memories felt different. They seemed softened somehow, touched by grace rather than sorrow. She reached the overlook, where the hillside revealed a sweeping view of the town below. Lights shimmered from windows, fireplaces crackled, and the distant sound of laughter drifted on the wind. Clara stood there for a long moment, realizing that even in seasons of uncertainty, beauty persisted. Life carried on. Hope endured. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply. "Teach me to trust you in the quiet," she whispered. The wind brushed past her like a gentle hand, and she sensed again that God was near, closer than she had ever realized. As Clara walked home under a darkening sky, she felt something settling into place within her. A readiness she had resisted for years, a willingness to believe that God was not only calling her closer, but preparing her for a season she could not yet see. And though she did not know what the coming days would bring, she carried within her a growing certainty that she was no longer walking alone, because something inside her had awakened, and she would not let it fade again. The next morning dawned with a silver glow settling gently over Clara's town, the kind of quiet light that makes everything appear soft and almost sacred. Clara woke with a sense of stillness she couldn't explain. It wasn't emptiness, nor was it the restless ache she used to carry. It was more like a calm readiness, as if her spirit had finally grown quiet enough to listen to what it had long ignored. She wrapped herself in a warm sweater, lit her Advent candle, and watched the flame dance. Something about watching that small flicker of light had become an anchor for her, a reminder that even a single flame could warm a room and soften a heart. As she walked to the shop, she felt the cold air bite gently at her cheeks, and the crunch of frost under her boots made her feel awake and alert. The oak tree across from the shop stood bare now, its branches stretching toward the sky like open hands. Clara stopped for a moment, imagining the way it would burst into life again in the spring. She studied its sturdy trunk and weathered bark. The tree had endured storms far worse than any she had seen, yet it still stood firm. Somehow that truth comforted her. Inside the shop, an unusual busyness filled the air. Advent was approaching, and people came searching for gifts, cards, and words of comfort they could offer others. Clara found herself greeting each person with a quiet joy, noticing how conversations that once felt routine now carried subtle depth. Some customers shared small burdens without meaning to: fears about finances, worries about their children, fatigue from demanding jobs. And Clara found herself listening with her whole heart. She didn't try to fix their problems. She simply offered her presence, her gentle understanding, her genuine kindness. And somehow that seemed enough. Around midday, a familiar face appeared at the door. It was the young man who had asked about starting over. He held the book she had recommended, its pages slightly worn, as though he had been reading it often. He approached the counter with the cautious hope of someone who wasn't sure whether life would let him hope again. I wanted to thank you," he said, clearing his throat. "That book, it helped. Not all at once, but something in it made me feel like maybe I'm not too far gone to change." Clara smiled softly. "You're not," she said. "God doesn't give up on people." He nodded slowly, his eyes bright with sincerity. "I'm trying, really trying. I just needed someone to believe it was possible." After he left, Clara felt a warmth settle over her. She realized that what she offered others wasn't extraordinary. It was simply the kindness she wished someone had offered her during her darkest seasons. Yet in giving it, she found herself receiving far more than she gave. It was as though God was teaching her that healing often comes not only through being helped, but through helping others. Late that afternoon, the shop grew quiet again as the sun began to lower. Clara took advantage of the peaceful moment to open the notebook Mr. Hale had left. She turned to a page she had not yet read, and the words felt like a tender whisper directly to her heart. When God stirs the heart, He does not call us to understand everything at once. He calls us to take one faithful step and then another. Faith is not a map. It is a light for the next few feet. Clara closed her eyes, letting those words rise and settle. She realized she had been trying to see the entire path ahead, trying to predict where God might be leading her, afraid that she might misstep or fail to understand His calling. But maybe she didn't need to see everything. Maybe she only needed to trust the one who walked with her. That evening, as she walked home, snow began to drift down in delicate flakes. It wasn't heavy, just a gentle dusting that softened the world. Clara lifted her face toward the sky and let the snowflakes kiss her cheeks. It made her feel like a child again, filled with wonder she hadn't felt in years. And in that moment, she understood something she couldn't have understood before her heart began to awaken. The small things were not small, they were grace. When she reached her apartment, she lit the Advent candle once again, watching its flame glow beneath the falling snow outside her window. She opened the notebook, intending to read a little more, but her phone vibrated unexpectedly. It was an unfamiliar number. She hesitated before answering. "Clara?" a tired voice said. She recognized it instantly. It was her older sister, Miriam. They hadn't spoken much in the past year, not because of anger, but because life had drifted them apart. Miriam had always been the strong one, the one who held everything together. Hearing her voice now, frail and uncertain, made Clara's heart ache. "I didn't know who else to call," Miriam whispered. "What's wrong?" Clara asked gently. There was a long pause before her sister spoke again. "I'm tired," she finally said. "So tired of trying to do everything alone. I thought I could handle it, but I can't anymore." Clara felt tears sting her eyes. She knew that tone all too well, the sound of someone reaching the end of their strength. She had lived that season herself. "Come over," Clara said softly. "Please, just come." Half an hour later, Miriam arrived with red eyes and trembling hands. She stepped into Clara's apartment and collapsed into her arms. For the first time in years, Clara held her sister the way she used to when they were children, when comfort didn't require words. They sat at the kitchen table with steaming tea in their hands, the Advent candle burning quietly between them. Slowly, brokenly, Miriam shared the burdens she had carried alone, the stress of her job, the unraveling of her relationship, The nights she cried herself to sleep because she didn't know what future she was walking toward. "I didn't want to bother you," she whispered. "You always seem to have everything together." Clara almost laughed, though not unkindly. "Miriam, I haven't had everything together in a long time, but I'm learning that I don't have to, and neither do you." Her sister's shoulders shook as she cried, but there was something different in her tears. Relief, maybe, or the beginning of release. They sat together until late into the night, talking in gentle tones, sharing memories, hopes, and fears they had never voiced before. And as they talked, Clara felt a surprising gratitude bloom in her chest. God was not only healing her heart, He was healing their relationship too. What she had feared was lost was being rebuilt piece by piece through honesty, vulnerability, and grace. When Miriam finally fell asleep on the couch, wrapped in a warm blanket, Clara blew out the Advent candle and whispered a quiet prayer of thanks. She felt a sense of purpose growing stronger inside her, an understanding that her journey wasn't just for her, it was for the people God placed in her path, for strangers seeking hope, for sisters seeking comfort, for her own heart learning to trust again. And she realized something else too. She was no longer asking God to prove He was near. She was beginning to live as though she knew He always was. Morning arrived softly with a muted sky and a gentle quiet that felt almost like a blessing resting over the town. Clara awoke to the sound of slow breathing in the living room. For a moment, she lay still, remembering that her sister had fallen asleep on the couch the night before. A small smile touched her lips. It had been a long time since the apartment held another heartbeat besides her own. She slipped out of bed, made coffee, and let its warm aroma drift through the space like an invitation for a new beginning. Miriam stirred a little later, sitting up slowly and rubbing her eyes as though she wasn't sure where she was. When she realized, she looked almost embarrassed, but Clara simply handed her a cup of coffee and sat beside her. They didn't speak right away. Sometimes healing doesn't need a rush of words. Sometimes the quiet is enough. The candle from the night before sat unlit on the table, and when Clara glanced at it, Miriam followed her gaze. "You've changed," Miriam murmured. "I don't know how to explain it, but there's something calmer about you now. Something lighter." Clara looked out the window where the light of early dawn filtered through the pale winter sky. She thought about the oak tree, the notebook, the conversations in the shop, the small acts of kindness that had passed through her days like threads weaving something she couldn't yet fully see. "I'm learning to breathe differently," she finally said, "to trust differently." Miriam nodded, her eyes softening. "I want that," she whispered. Throughout the day, Clara carried those words with her like a fragile seed she hoped would take root. She returned to the shop with a renewed sense of purpose, noticing details she had once overlooked. The way the morning light brightened the bookshelves, the warmth in people's faces when they found something meaningful, the small joys hidden in ordinary tasks. It felt as though her heart was learning to open wider, becoming more attentive to the quiet movements of grace. Later that afternoon, as she was arranging a new display of Advent books, a familiar elderly figure stepped inside. Mr. Hale walked with his usual slow, careful steps, but there was a brightness in his eyes she hadn't seen in a while. He greeted her with a gentle smile and handed her a folded sheet of paper. "I thought you might like this," he said softly. Clara unfolded the paper to find a handwritten note, one final reflection, dated the previous year. She felt the tender weight of the words before she even read them. When the heart begins to awaken, it often does so in small increments. One day at a time, one brave yes after another. But never doubt that God is patient. He waits for us to return, even if we come slowly, even if we come trembling. And when we do, we find He hasn't moved. He has been beside us all along. Clara pressed the paper to her chest, overwhelmed by the grace of it. She realized that Mr. Hale had been leaving her these notes in hopes she would one day need them, one day understand them. And now she did. In the following days, something quiet yet profound unfolded between Clara and Miriam. Her sister began visiting often, sometimes bringing pastries, sometimes arriving with tearful questions, sometimes simply needing the comfort of silence. Clara noticed how guarded Miriam had become over the years, how much she tried to hide her struggles beneath confident smiles. Watching her slowly open up felt like witnessing a flower pushing through frozen ground. And in helping her sister heal, Clara found her own healing deepening. One evening, they walked together through the town square, where the large Christmas tree glowed with warm lights. Children ran around it laughing, couples strolled hand in hand, and carolers sang near the fountain. The air smelled of cinnamon and pine, mixing with the sound of bells that chimed from the church tower. Miriam paused, taking in the scene with eyes that glimmered. "I forgot what this felt like," she whispered. "To look at something beautiful and actually feel it." Clara slipped her arm through her sister's. "You're finding your way back," she said gently. Miriam nodded, and for the first time in a long while, she smiled. Not a tired smile, not a forced one, but something real and unburdened. As Advent approached fully, Clara's heart began to sense an invitation she couldn't quite name. Every day she lit the candle, watched it flicker, and listened for the gentle voice she had come to recognize inside her silence. It wasn't a voice with sound, but with presence. It didn't give commands but direction. It did not pressure. It drew her towards something she could trust. One cold evening after closing the shop, Clara stayed behind for a moment. The lights were off except for the small lamp at the counter, which cast a warm golden glow. She sat by the window and watched the snow begin again, drifting like quiet prayers across the street. She reached for Mr. Hale's notebook, turning to a blank page. She hesitated, unsure what to write, but then felt her hand move almost on its own. "The small steps matter," she wrote. "The quiet yes matters. The moments when I choose trust over fear, hope over doubt, gentleness over self-protection, these moments shape me more than the ones that feel loud or dramatic. I am learning that God moves in the spaces I once dismissed as insignificant. I am learning that the heart's awakening is not a single moment, but a continual unfolding." As she finished writing, she felt tears gather in her eyes. Not tears of sadness, but of gratitude. She closed the notebook, pressed it gently with her hand, and whispered a quiet thank you. Not to the air, not to fate, but to the God she was learning to trust again. The following Sunday, Clara and Miriam attended church together for the first time in years. The sanctuary glowed with candles and evergreens, and as the choir began to sing, Clara felt her heart settle into a deep peace. During the service, the priest spoke about the Advent season, the season of waiting, of preparing, of learning to recognize God even in the quiet and the uncertain. His words felt like confirmation of everything Clara had been living. After communion, Clara knelt and closed her eyes. She didn't pray with desperate words like before. She simply rested her heart in the presence of the ones she had been returning to all along. And in that stillness, she realized that her journey was far from over, not in the sense of fear or anxiety, but in the sense of hope. She was not finished becoming who she was meant to be. God had only begun his work. As she and Miriam walked out of the church afterward, snowflakes landing softly in their hair, Clara felt a sense of promise in the cold air. Not a promise that life would suddenly become easy, but that she would never face life alone again. That night, she sat by the window of her apartment, the Advent candle glowing beside her, and reflected on the months behind her. She thought of how she had begun this journey tired, discouraged, unsure of herself, and unsure of God. She thought of how she had slowly learned to trust again, through small moments, through people who showed up with quiet wisdom, through unexpected reconnections, through gentle steps back toward faith. She realized now that the signs of her heart awakening had been there all along. They were in the gratitude she felt when someone smiled at her, in the compassion she felt when someone struggled, in the peace that came when she chose to let go of fear, in the warmth that spread through her when she helped someone else. They were in the quiet yes of choosing to open her heart again, even after being hurt. And she knew without doubt that this awakening would continue, that as long as she kept taking small steps of trust, God would continue shaping her, guiding her, strengthening her. She didn't need to see the whole path. The next step was enough. Clara leaned back, closed her eyes, and breathed deeply. For the first time in a long time, she felt whole. Not because everything in her life was perfect, but because her heart was finally at peace with the one who held her. And that peace, she realized, was the true miracle she had been waiting for. If this story brought you peace, hope, or strength, I invite you to like, share, subscribe, and comment to help others receive the same comfort. May God bless you richly on your journey.